Well, welcome and thank you for joining us for the opening of the Art of Being Black Conversation and Experience, presented by the Art Center of the Bluegrass, where we connect people to art, culture, and creativity. I'm Nikki Kincaid and I'm the Executive Director here. And I'd first like to start with, if we could all just be sure that you're muted. It's going to help with some of that background chaos noise that could be disturbing. And also, if you're not familiar with it, you might want to put on speaker view, because that will help you to be able to see the artist when they're speaking. So that would be up on your kind of right-hand corner where it says view. If you click on speaker, that may be helpful for you. So the idea of the Art of Being Black in Conversation and Experience came about late last summer and grew as our country grappled with the issue of race and injustices. And there were many conversations happening nationally and locally. And when we considered what role the Art Center could play or should play in those conversations, we figured our job was to listen. And so we brought together a fantastic advisory committee of Black community leaders and creative professionals who really helped shape our response. So the show is made up of 3 exhibits, and Call and Response is an open call for artwork that address the theme of the Black experience. And then the Art Center commissioned 5 Kentucky artists to create artwork for 2 other interrelated exhibits, Conversations and Momentum. So for the Conversation exhibit, the advisory committee brought members of the Black community together to talk about Black life in Danville, both historically and currently. And we invited 3 of our artists to listen into those conversations and interpret what they heard through their artwork. And then for the Momentum exhibit, we invited 2 artists who chose civil rights photographs, both historically and currently, and they interpreted the photographs through their artwork. So the show is open now. You can come into the building, and will be open through April 17th. And we invite you to come in safely and see the exhibits. And there are many opportunities for response and engagement. We also have a fully developed online version of the show. So today you're going to hear from 4 of our 5 artists as they talk about their artwork and how the show has inspired them. And as the artists speak, if you have any questions, you can pop them into the chat and I'll get them to Andrea, who will facilitate and will answer those questions the best we can. And there'll also be time for a Q&A at the end of the program. So the chair of our advisory committee is Andrea Abrams, who is the Associate Vice President for Diversity Affairs at Center College. And Andrea is also an anthropologist, giving her a really unique perspective on conversations and listening. And so Andrea will be introducing our artists and also facilitating this conversation. So I will give it over to Andrea Abrams.
Thank you, Nikki, and good night and welcome to everyone, or good evening rather, and welcome to everyone. I would like to begin by doing the introduction of our different artists. We have, as Nikki mentioned, 5. Ashley Cathy is from Louisville, Kentucky. She is a multidisciplinary social change artist. She typically works with large-scale portraiture and mural art, which focuses on the experiences and representation of Black people. She believes art is activism and often uses her pieces to bring a voice to social issues. Her vibrant artistic style defies convention and seeks to comment on the misrepresentation or underrepresentation of her subject matter. Another artist is Sandra Charles, also of Louisville. Sandra is an oil painter residing in Louisville, and her work revolves around the portrayal of African-American women. She uses striking color and subtle historical symbolism to explore, as well as to inspire self-confidence and empowerment. Tamesha Lovely Allen, is a self-taught portrait artist and figure artist from Louisville. She is interested in capturing her subjects in a single moment in time. Through her work, She hopes to bridge the connection between the viewer and the subject. Frank X. Walker of Lexington is known best as the former Kentucky Poet Laureate. He is a multidisciplinary artist, equally comfortable with words and paintbrushes. As a writer and visual artist, he is interested in how text and images can work together to heighten meaning. His work for this exhibit speaks to the intersection of sports and race and politics. Not with us is our fifth artist, who's Lavonne Williams, also of Lexington. He is an acclaimed urban folk carved sculpture and relief artist. Through a varied use of energetic color and angular forms, he is able to capture the spirited physical movement of jazz and the striking geometric contrast of patchwork quilt. His art is influenced by historical and cultural experiences. So the way we'd like to do this evening is that we're going to have a small conversation with each one of the artists. As we're having these conversations, their art should be displayed on the screen so you can get a sense of what it looks like, and we'll let them talk about it with us. And the first person we want to be in conversation with is Sandra. Ready, Sandra?
Yes, I'm ready. I had to unmute myself here.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing just fine. I'm happy to be here.
Good. What did you hear when we had our community conversations? You were part of those conversations where we sat down with community members and they talked about their experiences. What did you hear in those conversations that inspired you?
The one thing that I heard from the conversation was this: there was a common thread throughout all of the conversation, which was a very strong sense of community. And there was also a sense of responsibility and also of a kind of like a determination to keep the stories and the accomplishments of our ancestors alive. I found that very, very enduring.
So can you tell us about the two pieces that you submitted to the show?
Yes, the two pieces have to do with the multi-generational storytelling that I got from the conversations. All of the stories were so very enduring. For instance, the ones about the lady who talked about going over to Duncan Hill and sneaking and sliding during the winter time. But of all the stories, there was just that love of the community. What I wanted to do was show this storytelling and that sense of community, and as it goes from one generation to the next generation. One of the things that I wanted to do, the way that I decided to do it, was to incorporate the tradition of the African-American quilt in the paintings, because I find that the quilts are comfort. And one of the things that I say that the quilts are an artistic holder of our history. It also holds the pages of all the stories from one generation to the next generation. And in those stories, as you notice on the quilts, there's pages from a book that each figure holds, and in that book are the stories told from one generation to the next.
Wonderful. What is the relationship between the two women in the quilts on each panel?
Okay, the two paintings. One is called The Heritage, which represents our parents and our grandparents' generation, which has the older figure. And the other one is Legacy, which is really our children and our grandchildren. There's the relationship is, they're not related as in a family, but they're related in the community. It is the older generation passing on the information, our stories, our heritage to the younger generation, and that younger generation taking it in, because the older generation, which has given us the foundation to move on, and it helps the younger generation grow and, to become a part of our society.
Thank you. Those are definitely two beautiful pieces, and thank you for giving us some context as we look at them.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to talk to Ashley. Ashley, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi everyone. I'm traveling. I didn't want to have the video go in and out. I'm doing well.
Okay. Well, can you, your pieces speak to ideas of home and place and feeling comfortable or not in your space. Can you talk a little bit about these themes and how they relate to the conversations you heard?
Well, I heard a lot of the same that Sandra heard. But what stood out to me was the lack of space. Yes, Danville is, rural and there's a lot of land, but I heard a lot of people, they weren't complaining. They really weren't saying anything that anyone would think was actually negative, but there was never a sense of ownership. And that's what I felt was stuck out to me a lot. And then, there was a conversation about being in an all white neighborhood and all white spaces, and how that felt. And one person said that it was wonderful. And that really stuck out to me because I'd never heard that said before, not honestly. And I had to think about what that meant in all different ways, and and then other people, what they were speaking about and how it felt to be in a space where you were the only one, or during a time period where it wasn't comfortable for you, and how home is supposed to be the place that you go to that's comforting, that's a shelter, that's safe. And so often, people of color and Black people in particular have in America not held safe space, and even in the places that we call home. So this piece, the first one, is called Wonderful Like a Fly in Milk, because of sometimes what older people would say to me, like when you are sticking out or when you're standing out, and it's like a fly in milk, because the fly sticks out and they drown, right? And with this situation, it felt to me that there was all of these hidden stories and hidden things that were done, and always living, and being Black in Kentucky in particular, there's always this other world that we experience as Black people and other people do not. And often, especially in the art communities, we're asked to bring a part of that world in. And, throughout this, the time during the movement, I did a lot of social experiments. And one of them was, with a lot of my associates and art activists, basically, white allies entered a space where everyone in the space was a Black person, and every person in the space that was of some authority figure was also a Black person. And these people are fighting for justice and fighting for me to speak and for, others to live. And they felt extremely uncomfortable in these spaces. But as Black people, we are expected to be comfortable and to assimilate to these type of environments and what that does to us. So the other piece speaks on how it feels when you are in spaces, because there was dualities in these conversations. There was a whole other conversation that was about people and how they felt about their hometown and how they would never go back to Danville to live anymore. And that was my sentiment as a child, not ever wanting to come back to Kentucky to live. It is my home. I will always love it. But I did not feel the way I felt when I went to places that were more diverse and more welcoming of me and everything there is about me that has to do with my culture and who I am. So that's what these pieces really deal with.
I noticed that there are words in your work. How do these correlate to the conversations?
Some of them are actual interpretations of conversations and the stories that were being told. Within one piece, you know, I thought about Appalachia, and I thought about conversations with Black people that I know, um, that live in Kentucky, and then the conversations of the people on the videos, and they were talking about the dualities of, different perspectives of how that was. And they may have said it differently, but the sentiment was extremely similar across the board. So the words are those interpretations, and some of them are the questions, how does it feel to live in white spaces? And some of it is the conversations about being a Black mother and what that means and what you have to stand up and do, and and how being a Black mother in white spaces sometimes puts you in situations that you would normally be in to protect.
Thank you. So as I'm looking at your work, it looks like that you are showing different spaces. Could you tell us a little bit maybe about a couple of the spaces that we're seeing in your work?
Yes, it's a map. So the map is both are maps of travel through time and spaces and consciousness. Um, and they use different mediums to represent the different consciousness and the time periods. The dots are a representation of white people and Black people in those spaces, and how it feels. Even if there are multiple of them, do you have power? Do you have say so? Do you have space? And these are, to me, the hidden conversations and the hidden struggles and triumphs. And that's basically what the map is showing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very complex, and thank you for walking us through that. Now I'd like to speak to Tamesha. Are you ready? I see you, Tamesha. There you are.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for putting together this virtual show so that we could have an opportunity to share our work with, people who are interested in it.
It is our pleasure, and it's a gift from you to us. We really thank you for it. Can you tell us about the works you have in the exhibit and the motivation behind them?
Yes. Okay. I have two pieces in the exhibition. One is called My Life, My Humanity, and the other one is called I Am Still a Man. And what I had to do in this show is to use photo references from the civil rights movement of the past and one from the civil rights movement of the present. So in the one that you see here is, and then the other thing I had to do was, kind of describe the then and now. What does civil rights look like then in comparison to now? So in this first photo, you see a young man. This is back in 1968, and this gentleman is in Memphis, Tennessee, and he's attending a sanitation strike. This was just after two sanitation workers was killed by a compactor during a storm. And basically what was happening is the employees were constantly complaining about the lack of proper safety equipment. They didn't feel like they were taken care of by their employers. And then when these two gentlemen died, and then the company didn't want to help to support their wives and their children, they became angry. So they protested. And so what happened, the reason I chose this photo is the sign where it says, I am a man. And one of the things that I always try to generate in work that I create is a connection with humanity, the humanity of a person, like the validity of that life. And I want people to connect with their emotions, to connect with their environment, and to just, want to really get up and close and personal to who this person is. And when I think about civil rights, and as I was going through all these photos and books of, from the civil rights movement in the 1960s, and even today, one of the common words that stuck out to me is humanity. And this man is just simply saying a very simple phrase: I am a man. And for, to me, since the 1600s, since the beginning of the enslavement of Black people, it has always been that common fight for I'm a man. And so what I wanted to highlight was that, that every person needs to have a space for who they are. And this is the constant plight of a Black man. So in the painting, it's called I Am Still a Man. You find a gentleman in the foreground, and he has dreads, and he's wearing a t-shirt that states I am a man. And in the background, you see a few rows of Black men holding the I am a man sign from the 1960s. And I did actually use a photo reference from these protests. And what, the only difference you really see is how what the appearance of the protest is. The gentlemen in the background, they're all wearing suits. They're wearing what would appear to be their Sunday best. And then the gentleman in the foreground is wearing casual clothes. The people in the background have signs, but he's wearing a t-shirt. So the appearance of what civil rights and protest looks like is different, but the fight is still the same, validating our humanity. So if you look back further in the background, you see a sign that says Lorraine Motel. And one of the benefits of this exhibition was my ability to be able to learn more about the things that happened during the civil rights movement. And what I didn't know until I researched this photo was this is the same protest that Martin Luther King spoke his I've been to the mountaintop speech, and he was also murdered at this Lorraine Motel after he gave that speech. So, this putting that in the background is actually placing like a timestamp of this is 1968, and here we are in 2020, and it's still the same question, the same statement, I am a man. So, and then the other painting is called My Life, My Humanity. And the photo I chose for this present tense is of a young woman. She's pregnant, and she's carrying a sign that says, we are not carrying for 9 months, then struggling during labor for 9 hours, just for you to kneel on the neck for 9 minutes. Black Lives Matter. And she's in Washington, D.C., as you can see. And this resonated with me because I'm a mom. I have 3 high school students, 2 that are boys and 1 girl. And I connect with that because when I'm seeing these things happen that I've seen happen, and when I learned of, like when I was a little girl and I learned of Emmett Till, there's just this constant thing about feeling like you can't protect yourself. And then when you become a mom, there's this feeling that you are limited in how you protect your children. So it's just like, when I think about raising my children, you raise them with a set of values to respect, to be contributors to society, to be good citizens, to, go out there and accomplish their dreams. And, but the thing is that even though, you raise them to be decent people, they're still living in a world where they're not seen as whole people, or they're seen as thugs, or they're seen as something other than what you raised them to be. And so, the reason I chose this photo again is just simply that, to speak to a mother's inability to protect her children because of the way our government and legal system is set up, to not really include us. So in the painting, you see in the foreground, this is a teenage girl, and she's carrying a sign that says, does my race determine my humanity? And even though it's stated as a question, she's not really asking a question. It's more a question of how, it's more a statement in speaking to the contradiction of what America says it stands for versus what she sees it as. So what she was taught is that America is the home of the free and the land of the brave. And she's taught that people flee to America for the American dream. But what she sees in reality is that people who look like her are being killed. And she sees that people who look like her serve longer prison sentences. She sees a lot of holes in the statement of what America stands for. And in the painting, you see in the background a woman who is carrying a child. And this is a reference to an enslaved woman of America in the 1800s. And they're just kind of staring at her like, okay, what are you doing? And what this reference is for is that this humanity word has been the issue since the beginning of enslaving Black people. So when I think about this mother here in this painting, she's holding her child, and it's the same statement. You know, as an enslaved woman, as we all know, she was considered property. Her children were property. Her husband was property. And so she had limitations on how, first, if she's pregnant, she has limitations on the type of care she gets to, you know, grow a healthy baby in her body. And then when she is ready to go into labor, she's limited in what type of services she's offered to be able to deliver the baby and the baby live. And then as she weans her baby and she's, you know, trying to feed her baby to grow, she's got this constant fear and reality that someone could just come and snatch her baby away from her and sell her off, him or her off, to some other person somewhere else, or someone could come and rape her child, or someone could discipline or abuse her child, and she couldn't do anything about it. She had to accept it because she was considered property and she was not considered a human. You know, it's just like we were animals to them. And to now, it still feels the same way. And, you know, after so long, you know, when the vote started to matter, then we became 3/5 the person, not because of us, but because it benefited the Americans then, the white men. And so the idea is that for me as a mom and most mothers, we have this same condition. We still have this same dilemma. We're constantly talking to, I know for myself, I talk to my children. I live in a neighborhood that is predominantly white. I talk to them about, okay, if you go walking in the neighborhood, don't wear a hoodie. If you go into the grocery store, make sure your hands are not in your pocket. You know, there's all these things I have to say to them to try to keep them safe. And, you know, but then there's still limitations on how I'm able to keep them safe. So the reason I chose a young girl as a reference was because I wanted to speak to what this image means to even a young person. So the little girl in this painting is actually my 15-year-old daughter. And I had a discussion with her and asked her, you know, when she looks at the photograph of this woman, what does that mean to her, you know, in connection to what she sees? And she's like, well, I'm not a mom, so I can't relate to that. But I'm like, you know, well, what about, you know, when you are reading this sign and she's saying, you know, these things like, you know, I've done all this, I've had this child and now I can't protect him. What does that mean to you? And one of the things she said was, it just seems that once white men or people take humanity away from people, then it gives them the permission to treat them any way they want, because now their morals are gone. They don't have to use moral code when you're dealing with someone that you don't consider an equal to you, or subhuman, or an animal, or whatever the terms are used to address what Black people are. It's still the same thing. It's just, you know, well, you're going to get the abuse until you learn to accept the fact that we are human just like you.
Thank you. You touched on a lot of really challenging and important concepts there in those two pieces, and are really bringing together in important ways. Like you said, things that happened in the past, they continue to resonate in the present.
Yeah.
Very powerful work. Thank you for contextualizing that for us. Mr. Walker, are you there?
And unmuted.
Wonderful. So people know you as a poet. Can you tell us about the way that you have combined visual art and text in your work for this show?
I will try. What I was trying to do with the two pieces that you show here is to reach back to high school and middle school even, and start with the photographs, because I started with a photograph from the Olympics, and this is these gentlemen are protesting on the medal stand and had the gold medal stripped from them. And that's always been an iconic photograph for me. And as a recovering athlete, I've always been most impressed with athletes like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and today LeBron James. Those athletes that use their platform for social change and have been willing to risk their livelihood, and Jim Brown, made some choices over the years that people disagreed with, but he was another very outspoken professional athlete who was more vested in what happened in his community, and he didn't separate himself from his community. In the same way that, for most of Michael Jordan's life, he was criticized because he refused to make any statement that sounded political for fear of distancing his supporters and the individual companies that paid him to endorse their products. So the financial risk that came with that versus, being so committed to your community keeps you from being separated from what was happening politically and socially in those spaces. So I wanted to for that one painting that you saw first, I was trying to reach back to school, to think about how to say something politically and use the language of sports. And this is a traditional diagram for a basketball coach might show this particular play. But if you had a chance to look even closer, there are things that you would not see, including the diagram that is for tight packing on a slave ship during the Middle Passage. Those bodies on the right represent how enslaved people were packed in the hull of a ship. If you look even closer, some of those bodies have diagrams to indicate their gender or profession or something about them, to separate them, to make sure that you see them as individuals, not just as a person or a race. If you look even closer, there's a blue line at the top of the page that says Ohio River underneath it. And if you look at all the green arrows, they're heading north towards that Ohio River and what's implied as Ohio. So this whole piece, instead of being about a basketball play, it's about the Underground Railroad and trying to escape, and the coach telling these quote unquote players, how to get to their freedom. And so part of this narrative includes the things they're running away from. And on the left side of the page, the things they're trying to escape are written very subtly inside the red X's, and all the pain and horror and punishment connected with enslavement. It's always been important to me when we talk about enslavement and the period of slavery in school, because growing up in Kentucky, there's always been this myth that Kentucky was a great place to be a slave in, that for whatever reason, because the owners were nicer, that there wasn't brutality here, there wasn't as much horror here like it was in the Deep South. But if you look at, say, what happened around enslaved people joining the Union Army in order to get their freedom, Kentucky was one of the leading states in the country to send African Americans into the army to get that freedom, because they wanted it so badly. And of course, at the same time, any man joining, his whole family became free. And I thought about all the years I drove from Danville to Lexington and drove right by Camp Nelson and never visited. Was never taken there on a school trip. It was never deemed important as part of my education. And I wondered how many other young people of every color had not had that opportunity to learn this very important Kentucky history, partly by just taking that trip and making that a stop as part of the educational journey. I know I went to Mammoth Cave and been all over the state, but this would have been a trip that could have happened in the morning and we could have gotten back before lunch, but it never happened for me. So I wanted to make a statement in that way and try to keep it in language that people understood. Because I think when you first look at it, it seems so simplistic. There's nothing about it that's threatening. It doesn't even seem political until you get really, really close and you understand that, that's 6X at the top of the page with the black and white stripes. Is that a referee? Had been thinking about my grandson. His team was playing in Somerset at a tournament, and the referees were cheating. It was blatant, it was obvious. And I was sitting with other parents of the players, and one of the fathers protested a call, and the referee turned to him and yelled and told him to sit down like he was talking to a child. And then the gentleman sitting next to him, who happened to be my son-in-law, said, "Why does he have to sit down?" And the referee stopped the game and threw both of them out of the gym. And I tried to be part of a calming down process at halftime, talking to the head referee. And the referee in question said he felt threatened because those black men stood up and challenged the call like any parent would have done. But and then that idea, and I thought about how many times have I heard that, where the policeman shot a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old child because he said his fist was balled up, or he was looking menacing, or he felt threatened. And some of those threatening looks happened apparently while they were running away from them. So many of those young men were shot in the back. And I think it's, how do you be afraid of a man who was running away from you? So there's so much wrapped up in that, and has as much to do about the fear and the perception of black bodies by a certain element in our society, including not all policemen, but those policemen who respond from fear, and they use their weaponry and power as the equalizer, or they think of it as getting something equal. So I was trying to wrap up all of that and try to marry that same current or contemporary horror and pain to me, in my opinion, the most similar thing in time was during enslavement, when the same kind of power over our bodies existed, and punishment could be death for something as simple as wanting your freedom or speaking up or expressing yourself. If you look at, if you do research and look at the lynchings, including Kentucky, around the country, and you can find information where they tell you what was the cause of the lynching. And I think the one in Russellville, Kentucky, the crime was cussing a white woman or speaking up or arguing or talking back. If that costs you your life, it says something about what the attitude about you already is. And so I was trying to use all of that and various shades of us to try to tell that story. This current image that you're looking at, I'm still trying to advance a narrative, but I'm trying to also do it in a way that's initially not threatening, because they're just symbols, and generally symbols aren't very threatening, and they're cartoonish intentionally. I think this is called African-American History 101. But what I was thinking about is how so many people use their telephones to communicate, and much of that communication has been reduced to acronyms or emojis, simple symbols that mean a whole lot. So I thought about, what could I say that symbolized the same time period with the same individuals? So I wanted to create something that called up school and students. So I wanted to create this thing that looked like a chalkboard. So this particular work looks like a chalkboard, and those symbols are trying to say that 12.5 million people had Africa taken away from them, multiply that by the amount of punishment, plus the power that comes with owning the gun and the Bible, using those things to amplify the power, plus cotton. And cotton is, that's emblematic of what happened in the South, how this country was built on the backs of all that cotton that was picked, all the banks that built monies from selling that cotton, all those universities that exist because of the money from that cotton, and where the people who did the picking end up with nothing, and often death, dying in the fields. And this work included work by children. And this equation continues when you add to that the power of not only creating all the laws in your favor, but owning the ballot box and making it illegal to vote for people of color and women at the same time period, gives you even more power. Amplified by the power of the courthouse, the justice system, and the power of the police. That's multiplied by 3 times the power of education. The cap above this piece of paper that says deed, represents the power of land ownership. All the wealth that's accumulated because you own the property and you own the schools, you own the justice, you own all of that, and it equals money. And not just a little bag of money, but a whole bag of money. So American wealth, those old families and that old wealth, came because of this particular formula. And then there's this asterisk next to that thing of money, and you look down the corner and it says, whites only. And that's supposed to be the kind of final kick in the stomach as you realize how racist this system was. Even though these are very simple symbols, and none of them by themselves are intimidating, but when you spend time with this image collectively, you get the full power and sense of what has happened in this country because of how African people were brutalized, were utilized, and the benefit for certain peoples and families was this immense wealth. And it still is a factor today. A lot of, I talk to people all the time who talk about, well, why don't they just go to college, or, why can't they do this or that? And they never consider the advantages you have if, you live in a house that, your grandparents gave you, or if when a parent passed away, they left you $100,000, or if you drive a car that somebody gave you as a wedding gift. Most of my peers did not have that kind of advantages in the world, didn't have those kind of privileges. So the whole idea of, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, that if we worked harder, that we could have as much as everybody else, that because we're behind in some areas, it's our own fault, that there's no such thing as institutional racism. It just always amazing to me that people can look at the same thing and see it totally different. So I was trying to put these ideas and hope that the whole conversation would happen because people are not intimidated by the image themselves. This is another version of that. And this is about the exploitation of Black bodies, where the bodies themselves don't benefit. You can look all the time and see that, Coach Cal makes about $10 million a year. If one of his players takes a free steak dinner, he could lose a scholarship. The NCAA from, I think is the NCAA tournament in basketball alone, the commercial time for that is worth $1 billion. $1 billion. But the players don't get any of that, and people say, but they get a free education. Is it worth $1 billion? And are they really getting education? Because all my friends who are athletes, at least at a D1 school like I went to at UK, the number one focus for them was playing ball, was staying active, staying eligible. So they give them bunny classes and majors that aren't going to give them a job in the afterlife, after sports. So the whole thing is really a one-sided, very lopsided, exploitative system. And it's only recently that they've talked about changing the rules so that at least the players can earn money from their own image or to sell their own jersey. Because if they didn't do that, at some point, there's going to be a revolt. If you take all those athletes out of the system, it'll crash.
Absolutely.
A lot of money to be lost. And those are big conversations, but I wanted to reduce the conversation, at least the start of it, to something very simple and non-intimidating, as warm and friendly as icons. So this body minus cotton, instead of picking cotton, they're now picking sports. You know, Times endorsement deals like with Nike. You know, I have a poem about the power of athletic shoes called Death by Basketball, but how these things all equal money eventually. And the coaches make millions, the athletic departments make millions, the schools make millions. Most of those coaches are white. Most of those departments are headed by men who are white. And those schools use that money however they want. They redistribute it, they give each other raises, but they still make sure those athletes, particularly those really outstanding athletes of color, don't benefit, and then try to penalize them for leaving school early or write horrible things about them in the news or make them try to feel guilty if they want to leave school after you know, the whole one and done idea. People criticize Coach Cal for having these wonderful athletes that leave after 1 year and go get paid $100 million to play basketball and buy the mother a house if they need it, and then live in a certain way. But they never talk about how many of those athletes come back to UK and still graduate.
Right, Frank?
Who go to school in the summer, who are so committed to education that they never let that leave them, but they were real clear about their own personal value, that they had to leave and take advantage of the system. But of course, for everyone that makes it, there are 20 that do not. They get injured, that lose scholarships, that don't graduate. And those conversations don't happen in the way that they should.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. That really helps you took some what seemed like simple images and showed just how deep and complex what the conversation really is. Nikki, do you have any last words for us, or?
Again, we're so appreciative of you being here and the artists sharing their stories about their work. And we hope you're able to come take a look, come in the building and put on that mask. And the work is, most of the work is very large. I'm just going to do this. I didn't plan to do this. But as you can see, I'm not sure if you can, the pieces really are large and powerful to be in here looking at them. So I hope you have that opportunity. And if not, please go online. There's a lovely version of it online as well. So thank you very much for coming.